In this section of our program, we are going to be organizing our first panel, which will be about regional and political developments in Syria. We would like to invite our Foreign Policy Researches Director, Murat Yeşiltaş from SETA, as the moderator. The President of the National Intelligence Academy, Professor Talha Köse, as our first panelist, kindly invited to the floor. From Medeniyet University, PhD holder Helin Sarı, and from Sakarya University, Professor Kemal İnat, kindly invited to the floor. Thank you very much for this invitation. Well, welcome again. This is the first panel of our symposium conference today. In the morning, we had very productive opening remarks and very enlightening, be it the general coordinator or the minister highlighted very important points. Now we will go into different perspectives to look into Syria and the new Syria. We have three valuable participants and panelists with us who have just taken their places on the stage. Allow me to leave the floor to first Professor Talha Köse, the President of the National Intelligence Academy. Well, we're trying to interpret and understand this new era from three different angles. It's been a year, and during this year, the rhythm internally and the externally is now synchronized. Well, with these very intensive diplomacy actions and engagement taking place abroad, was quite unexpected, honestly. We weren't expecting that harmony that quickly, all the way from the US to Europe to the region. Many actors have accepted the new Syria and had supported removal of sanctions. So this has been a consolidating effect on Syria, the new Syria. Maybe as the elephant in the room, of course, as expressed by the president, cannot be counted as one of those. But we see that this momentum internally is not as adapted to the external one. There are still some issues where relatively Syria is still a little partitioned territory-wise. There are still YPG or PKK problems, as well as Israel's security engagement, are all making us question on how to protect the territorial integrity of Syria. Russia, Iran, and their positions have shifted significantly. Some structural dynamics are under question nowadays. And we can see that those two countries have structurally changed their approach to Syria as well. But internally, we can say there are some synchronization problems with the rhythm that we have obtained externally. We will look into that now. And Talha Bey is going to give us more information with regards to their publications they had in the post-conflict era. And restructuring is his field of specialty anyway. And Helin Sarı will give us insights on the before and after of Syria. What are continuations? What are changes? What does it interpret into the neighborhood as well as West? And finally, Kemal Bey and Nebi Bey together has written a book, The New Syria and the International Actors. So Professor Kemal is going to talk about how international actors are approaching to New Syria. So allow me to leave the floor to Talha first. We will have 10-12 minutes of your time. Then we will open the floor for your questions to be more interactive. Talha Bey, please, the floor is yours. Thank you very much, Murat. Also, thanks to SETA, this is a very important event that we are marking here today. In the past, We, of course, organized and hosted dozens of panels under the roof of SETA, looking into different dimensions of the conflict. So, coming here today and discussing the future of Syria is positive to start with. On the one hand, looking at the picture of Syria, there seems to be a swing between hope and concern since the last 1 year. It's been a year, and of course, there has been many hope evoking, let's say, events taking place and unraveling. Looking at even the eyes of Syrians when you're out in the field and interact with them, you can see they are positive. They have very positive expectations. There is very important for future with regards to diplomacy and so on. And in terms of meeting the fundamental basic needs of the country, we have some positive achievements, be it the utilities or food and so on and so forth. So on one hand, looking at it from one side, an angle, we can see a hope, giving hope, evoking positive pattern. But from other perspective, we're talking about a country that has gone through severe destruction in the last 15 years, and not an easy one, honestly. So countries who have experienced internal conflicts and compare it with this Syria's experience, we can see that Syria's infrastructure as well as the destruction of the social pattern and the massacres took place. Syria is at the moment standing a little worse than many other internal conflicts we have experienced worldwide. Well, of course, I would like to look at it from the restructuring and rebuilding of peace perspective, looking at it from a security perspective. At top bottom is stability can be secured, but considering the past problems in Syria, this type of a restructuring with security in the heart and top to bottom perspective maybe give some results, but can be also short-lived as well, because it won't be easy to overcome the destruction of the conflict they have been through. Therefore, for them to be able to do so and overcome the destruction, it should be a bottom-up ownership. The social structure needs to be rebuilt as well as a state and with its own institutions and agencies. And it needs to be done with an inclusive and participatory manner. So with the damages down, now we have to look at what the damage was. Up until today, the estimated loss of life is over 600,000 lives. Some records it higher. 14 million people displaced, 7.5 internally and 6.5 beyond the borders of Syria. The infrastructure is completely destroyed, particularly in education and health. Rebuilding those two systems are not easy, as well as telecommunication is also disrupted, completely destroyed. The roads are still functioning. On another note, we can see that the previous structures, the state structures, be it organs and bodies and agencies, are no longer valid. It's not possible to adopt the old ways when we are trying to establish security. In terms of infrastructure, the loss is calculated to be around $100 billion worth. So looking at it from this picture, this angle, rebuilding in a short time span would not be possible. And that restructuring can only be overcome by a total social participation. Besides the financial destruction, the social structure, the social pattern has been disrupted as well. This is of critical importance. Since its establishment, yes, this country has been led by and governed by some authoritarian administrations where using different religious sects or religious ethnicities against each other to on further consolidate its power. This was the system, and this is the core reason why we had the conflict. So now rebuilding this social structure that has been completely destroyed will be taking more time. There are a couple of paradoxes when we are talking about this future. What are the short and medium term objectives and goals? Well, in the short term, of course, a human centered security can bring along some stability to the region, to the country. Maybe your focus can be on security, but after that, to rebuild the society as well as the infrastructure, there will be other measures necessary, and it will probably take 20-25 years to normalize according to the literature after a 14-15 year of a conflict, in case there are no follow-up conflicts. We also know that once the conflict is over, the risk of living the conflict in the next 5 years is 40%, as per the literature suggests. So there is still a significant fragile environment. There is a possibility of conflict or going back. So or to regain what where it started, it will take 20-25 years without conflict. So it looks very impossible to do it with their own means only, and we see there are numerous limitations to be able to overcome those vulnerabilities. We need an overarching international model as well. The previous conference and the dialogues were very important, yes, we know, but considering now 15 years of a conflict, internal war, on top of that a 70-year long authoritarian regime, it won't be possible to change Syria overnight with a conference and dialogue. So Syria should adopt national dialogue and national reconstruction as an important parameter for rebuilding itself. And after the national dialogue, the main roadmap will come alive. But these are all kind of like mid-term goals. And for that to become real, we need first security in place, so that we cannot postpone security. As the minister mentioned, in Tartus, Lasky, and Suaitapa regions, or other regions which are under the control of SEG, are still going through some challenges and problems. In order to overcome those, they need some security resources. So we are facing a paradox here. There's a paradoxical question here. Without overcoming those problems, you cannot rebuild security in the country. In the absence of security in the country, you cannot attract investment and you cannot get normalized, which means that the question is, which one shall we focus on? In my opinion, in the absence of an external intervention, there is a slight advantage. We're talking about a young, dynamic population here who can to adapt to changes and requirements. The leader is also among this young group, and this is an advantage they can use as a higher hand. And now they are also being more and more acknowledged and recognized within their country as well as internationally. Yes, we are talking about significant challenges, but on another note, we see that they are well recognized within their country and also in the international arena. On another note, on additionally, there are countries like Turkey who have always supported them even during the phase of the conflict. That's an important actor for them, sending a helping hand and supporting hand in their reconstruction as well. And many others are also involved positively. So there's also some kind of like other advantages, like this leader who wants to introduce something new, society who has hope for a brighter future. Although there is a structure which is vulnerable, the overall international attitude is to stabilize Syria and help it restructure and to overcome this destruction that has suffered. Also, IMF and World Bank and other international funds are already declaring their willingness to provide funding for Syria's reconstruction. So there has already been contact with different societal segments and groups in the country. Although in Sway Mountain or the Tarsus and Lakorsky there are some problems, still there has been contacts established with the leaders, those sub-regional leaders. We see that the most kind of like problematic area is the northeastern side, and Turkey is already offering a helping hand for overcoming that problem also in that regional part. So looking at it from the point of having this security, and if our perspective is to build a long living standing stability, which has only been, by the way, built and done by security up until now in their history. And from the perspective of peace building, what can be done is the question. First of all, this national dialogue should be expanded. Yes, it has been a starting point, but since Syria has been re-established, we see that there are societal groups which have no contact, which are marginalized. It is important that they need to come together. When it comes to the administration, the form of administration, the question is whether it's going to be central or federal. We have seen that the central period system hasn't been very positive for Syria. So there needs to be a cooperation to decide on the way to forward, and there should be a participatory political structure in place. I'm not talking about like the liberal peace perspective. No, it's not only that one. Syria has its own realities in place, just like in Bosnia or Iraq and Afghanistan before. In different examples, we have seen that this one vote, the democracy, the way we implement and impose in those countries didn't come along with the stability that we are desiring. Indeed, it's just deepened the separation among different segments of the society. We have seen it in Bosnia, in Iraq, and in other examples as well. So therefore, it should have its own tailor-made, participatory, including all the ethnical and religious minorities. Justice mechanism is also very important, because we see that when you avoid facing the problems of the past without giving them a sense of justice is there, when those who have been in mal behavior is not punished and penalized for their actions, the society cannot rest. Also, in order to build the humanitarian capacity, particularly in the field of health and education, the infrastructure needs to be rebuilt as quickly as possible so the Syrians can return to their country. They have great human resources and investment potential, and a diaspora which is also strong. We can see that there is a strong, resourceful Syrian diaspora abroad, and they are willing to bring it back to their country. But they need a reliable structure, a participatory political structure, and a transparent economic system in place to be convinced to return to Syria. So therefore, there are significant interventions, messages, and steps that needs to be taken and shared with the international community. At this point, from the Syria's point of view, at this point, this dilemma between concern and hope seems to be going to be persistent for a while, and we should also not disregard that elephant in the room. Yes, we are taking significant steps to normalize Syria, but particularly as long as we fail to normalize in the field of security, economic, and other ones, doesn't seem to be very possible. Also, in terms of Turkey, we have this terror-free Turkey process that we have been in since the last 1.5 years, which can also support the Syria security as well. So any solutions with SDG would play a significant role for Turkey as well. And we are aware of all the vulnerabilities. But what is very important is that when we are planning about the future of Syria, we need to consider short, medium, and long-term goals, including the societal contribution and a participatory method for it. And also Syria is an actor who needs international financing as well and investment, so this should be coordinated. Well, what is positive is that many actors in the region are willing to support stability in Syria, be it Turkey or Saudi Arabia or maybe Iraq probably may be changing its attitude in the near future. So it looks like the overall region has a consensus on their desire to end this conflict for good. Yes, stability can be built in Syria one way or another, but the way it is done will show us whether we will have a mid or long-term peace built in the country. Those mistakes that are made in the past should not be repeated in Syria. Thank you very much for your very valuable contributions. Now, allow me to leave the floor to Helin, Professor Helin. Well, Talha already mentioned some paradox and said that building a sustainable stability is of critical importance to establish peace as well. Also, in the 8th of December, we had just this revolution, and there's now the conflict between the old Syria and new Syria, and where will it become very explicitly apparent there? When will we be able to say the old has completely been removed?
So Talha Bey explained many things, but maybe I can highlight a few aspects in addition to that. So the previous Syria and new Syria that I would like to highlight. Think of a country where everybody is scared of each other and they think that they're going to be reported. The moment they are realized, the many security elements share intelligence, rightfully or unrightfully. The reporting cases are a lot. And there is a torture settings in prisons, and the mothers, fathers don't know what happened to their children. In such a setting, when you look at the triggering effect to that, of course, sometimes it is the way of governance, but there are strong identification and identity-related breakdowns. So they say that Syria is a micro model of Middle East. That's the overall picture in Middle East, but when you look at the world, the spotlights are on Syria right now for a very long time. And Turkey has been focusing on Syria for a longer time even. And this country is very important for Turkey. We should highlight that. And there is one more thing that I would like to highlight. His Excellency President Erdogan said that Syria is our internal problem, he said. And I thought a lot about that. And I also still think about it. And they are most probably rightful to say that because the countries apply and practice strategies and policies, and sometimes they may not acquire the results they want to, and sometimes they can learn lessons from it. I work a lot with the foreign policy of the United States, and United States is one of the countries who make a lot of mistakes, but they easily realize that and develop new strategies. They are really important for us. So in this regard, Turkey has a constructive perspective. And I'm sure that you remember that after the declaration of the new regime, in a car, in a driver's seat, Shara was driving the car, and next to that, Ibrahim Kalın was there. In that process, this can highlight the perspective of Turkey. The driver is Turkey. They have the right to govern their own country, and now temporarily, but hopefully the permanent for the future representatives after the elections and the constitutional processes. And Turkey is there as a guide. So it is also important for the stability of Turkey too. I wanted to highlight that. Again, the regime is fallen, and I remember the day it was reflected on the press. I have a student, a Syrian student at my classroom, and we danced together with my student. We, uh, because Raif, I've seen what he has been through in this country. Right now, he's a graduate of a university, but I I can feel what he has been through. And he's been saying that he wants to get back to his country, but he is aware of that he cannot return right now. When the conditions are better, of course, he would like to get back, provide contribution. And what we are going to do as Turkey is very important. There is one thing that I care about a lot. There were lots of traps in the military. Means there are a lot of actors who would like to see our army in the field. Maybe this could even be the strategy of Israel, but we should have a logical, reasonable, and the Turkish diplomacy and the policy should be plotted based on the rational mind. If we do that, the results will be quite successful. So far, we see a cold-blooded, careful Turkey, and in the last 1 year, again, we drove the attention of the international actors, ensuring the establishment towards Shara, and again looking at the region and the construction of the peace, starting with the United States and the Western countries are also closely monitoring these processes. This is a success for us. We're always talking about the niche diplomacy field of Turkey, but Syria is a field on its own. And so far, so good. And I hope that we will be able to continue to do so. And I think that this note of Talha Bay is important. There will be long processes. One resource tells us that if there is an internal war, the reconstruction recovery phase will be 2 times higher than the duration of the internal conflict. 13 years times 2 can take almost 30 years. So we'll have 3 decades. And in the most vulnerable process is the first 5-year period. At that time, the institutions are temporal, of course, so they are quite vulnerable since they're temporary. There is a confusion because of the commercial reasons. The banking services is very difficult. My husband visited Syria, and he told me that there is a communication problem between the institutions. So the previous and the new institutions having problems to have communication. It is difficult to clarify their responsibilities, whether it is Turkey or not, whether it is another topic or not. It makes it difficult to make a decision. This is important. Again, the spoiler, we can say, or the stability broker or sabotaging countries, actors can also attempt some aspects in 2 and 5 years. They are quite powerful in this regard. So if they have any intention for sabotage, they are quite powerful right now. It is an aspect that we should be very careful about. It's not like seeing them overpowered and they're like super powerful. It is impossible to have a victory against them. But rather than this understanding, I'm just highlighting the danger. So as long as it is not necessary, we should be careful about that. It also, when it comes to the regional powers and the international actors and owning the problem by them, of course, we can show our efforts in this regard too. These are some of the observations that I have. And we said that we shouldn't be hopeless. And in life, I am too optimistic sometimes. Feel of desperate or being hopeless is not useful for anyone. The future of Syria is the future of yours. I'm not exaggerating that. Just like the blue nation concept we have, it will be a subject for the next 2-3 generations. It will be good to be very careful about the future stability piece of Syria because of the regional dynamics. And also there will be some internally continuing processes and hopefully uh, Turkey without terror. We should own these approaches. These are things that we all should do. And my highlight should be realized that as it was in the Cyprus, in the Cyprus case, Turkey had only one voice, especially after the 74 operation. The same approach should be on Syria too, without buts, without however's. This government style can change, but it should be integrated and they should succeed to be together and they can reach out to a permanent peace. And this is one of our biggest, or this should be one of our biggest objectives. Now, Galton, in our solution to conflicts, this is one of the biggest names. When we look at the past, of course, especially during the World War II, there is such an operation on them, and while his father was being beaten by Nazis, the Galton is influenced by that, and in his future life he focused on the solution of conflicts and how can we make peace permanent. And Galtung underlines two main aspects. One of them is the physical violence that draws societies to war. And when we see that, many of us can say that this is a violence. This is physical violence, but there's also a pyramid along with that. And there's also cultural and structural violence. The feature of Turkey, especially in terms of cultural violence, should be exterminated, but it will take a longer time because of the trust issues. In my first words, I told that nobody trusts each other, and in such a structure of nation, you cannot have a zero cultural violence in one day. It is about religious, ethnical understandings by separating them, discriminating them, not respecting their religious holidays, not respecting their languages, or taking it as a threat. And there is an Israel that is using that over the Dead Seas, for example. They are trying to be effective on the south, and especially in the recent times, USA stands similar to the idea of Turkey, but the ratios might be really low, and this could be the Kurdish population, but still United States or some other forces might be there. In such country, you cannot exterminate cultural violence in one day. And there's also the education side of it. That of course, this is a long-term objective, and while constructing long-term peace in the upcoming decades, it should be invested in a lot. Christians have a different understanding, and the Western people are mainly focusing on them, right? When Shara was was the leader for the first time, he first said that they will never be harmed. And many different elements have the same claim. What is going to happen to us later on? What is the solution to that permanent, just, and permanent constitution? Of course, I'm not a constitutional law specialist, but within the body of SETA in Istanbul, we had a meeting in Istanbul in the previous weeks, and some of legal professionals have provided important information to us, and a strong constitution is needed, and also the international will that to support that is needed too. Shara, similar to Turkey, again stabilize, and they also have this cold-blooded understanding, and also for the international actors in Turkey and also in the Bay countries. They also have an important approach to that, and they also started to believe in Shara and his legitimacy, and also some barriers over some investments are now paved. Sanctions that were previously imposed by US is now being removed. They were rather late, but still there. And for the temporary government, and the support has a vital importance. The conflict resolution and what are the factors to become successful. Let me tell you that if the regime is changed as a result of victory, it can construct a more peaceful solution. We needed that victory, and we had it. Assad left the country's oppositions won. They said that this is a revolution. So this is important to construct the peace, not rather than having like long negotiations, so-called peace. Rather than these kinds of approaches, this has a more permanent solution. This is also important statistically too, because we have it at our hands, and the correct administration is of great importance. I find it very important. We shouldn't be pressurizing centralized government, or we shouldn't be too away from a centralized structure, because this guarantee can overcome the problems. The Syrian people should be granted with this right, and Turkey should always keep the communication channels open. YPG, for example, has been explaining a lot of things in the previous weeks. I've seen that Mazlum Abdi, or not, rather than saying that Malum Abdi term. So if we say that Malum Abdi in this case, in Tel Aviv, he provides some explanation in Israeli TVs, for example, and they have some certain objectives, of course, even though there are some provocative steps. What we need to do is to keep an open dialogue. And for weeks, they've been saying that we care about the Turkey's dialogue, and we have open dialogue channels with Turkey. That's what we need to focus on. Rather than saying that we cannot agree upon and giving it to Israel, we should empower the negotiation. We need to have an open dialogue, and to ensure a permanent dialogue. It is also very important for our combat against terror too. Let me highlight the four main factors for a successful Syria. First, effective functional bureaucracy should be established. It is the agencies, institutions. Daron Acemoglu, as you may know it well, underlines this aspect. The second one, an operating legal framework, and of course, it starts with a solid constitution. And the third one is the army, creation of an army, a solid army, and one single army. No two armies should be there. Look at United States; they have one army. But if you're talking about the states, they have their own security forces, of course. And lastly, I would like to say that the stability signs are important to draw new investments, and it shouldn't be about only the big countries. IMF, World Bank, United Nations should also be activated, and the region should be developed as soon as possible. And the strategical approach is very important in this regard too. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, following this presentation, I think the elephant in the room, as the minister mentioned, so here we are listening to the positions of different actors. It's a very dynamic process. We need to be very careful. And starting from this, now we will be able to focus what we can do looking into our resources and also considering Israel's presence. Please, floor is yours. Microphone closer, please. Mikrofon lütfen. Mikrofon lütfen. Yakın olması gerekiyor efendim. Yakın olmayınca almıyor. Yakınken duyuluyor. I can hear when it's close enough. Yakınken. Yakın iyi. Thank you very much. Well, the elephant in the room metaphor, I didn't think of it before. I only came more apparent after the minister mentioned it, and it's been mentioned here. I think it's not the elephant in the room only, it's elephant in a large house, because I am working on Zionism and Zionism's role since the 7th of October, be it Germany, the US, and others, and their role, and how Zionism has an impact and effect on the policies of those countries since the 7th of October. And I have seen in Germany that the elephant is quite big. You can't have one room to fit it, the whole house, and the house considered as the planet itself. It looks like the world has one elephant. And unfortunately, with regards to the Israel elephant in the room and Syria, it will be a negative element and factor for the future of Syria. I will talk about that, but what I was planning to share with you on the stage today is that with regards to which actors will be setting the future of Syria. So let me start. Which actors will redefine the future of Syria? One of them is Turkey. So I will focus on Turkey a bit, because in that book that has been mentioned to you, I have written the chapter on Turkey's policy on Syria. And I will also mention the elephant in the room. So when we talk about the future of Syria, the actor, of course, most important is the internal actors, be it administration and the people with all its components, be it of ethnicity and religious. They will all be determinants. They will have the power to determine the future to the most extent. As Helin mentioned, if they take the right steps, correct steps, which they have done up until now, looking at the past and the history in Syria, and as well as where the movement came from which history it came from, you wouldn't expect them to take such rational steps, but they have done so, to which Turkey has contributed significantly to. It should continue that way. A very inclusive constitutional process should further be expanded. And there shouldn't be also an authoritarian central structure as well. But on another note, we should be able to protect the balance to establish, because it's not only the internal actors, domestic actors, it's also the external ones, be it Israel or other actors which are invoked by Zionism, are always trying to and will try to prevent those rational policies that are already being taken by the administration in Syria now. Up until now, the people were already deprived of taking those rational steps. And I am concerned that they will still preserve that policy and attitude. But no matter what, those actors will all be the core, domestic actors will be the core determinants. If they take their steps correctly, they will be able to buffer the effect of the external negative factors. Since I don't have time to go into all of these details, I'm only being brief. The second determinant actor in the future of Syria is Turkey, in my opinion. Up until now, be it before December the 8th or post December the 8th, Turkey has always played a determinant role, always constructive, always trying its best. The third one is the US and Israel. I don't know if we can count them as separate actors or jointly. So we have become accustomed to considering them jointly. No, the US and Israel. We know it's the effect of Zionism in the US. But if you have noticed during the speech of the minister, the Netanyahu administration is not very synchronized, well synchronized with the Trump administration at the time being. That's also, of course, another topic to talk for long hours. Normally, we know that the Trump administration, during the first term of first in the office, did take decisions and adopted policies that would favor Israel the most. However, currently there is also a tension between the two, the Netanyahu and the Trump administration. Netanyahu administration's activities in Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, Qatar, and all the way to Iran. The US is not willing to be involved with that. We have seen it during the Iran, for example, air raids. They did say they don't want to be involved, although they were forced to, let's say. So maybe we can distinguish for this case the US administration and Israel. They will have impact on the future of Syria separately. And that's a conflict for the first time. And for instance, there were some steps taken during the first Trump administration, which accepted, for example, Jerusalem as a capital and relocated their embassy there. So the Trump administration, which was supporting them so much, Israel so much, is still yes supporting, but they have a tension now, which brings us to the point that they may be falling apart in some of their joint actions. You might also see that there is a Trump from time to time in his discourse warning Netanyahu, which shows us that they are not as synced as they were before. Or maybe it's a pretense, we also don't know. The fourth element, the fourth determinant is the Arab states. It's going to be determining the future of Syria as well. Are they going to be aligned with Turkey, or are they going to be aligned with the axis of US and Israel, or separately with US and Israeli axes? This is going to play a critical role because the rebuilding of and rehabilitation of Syria will take 20-25 years, and one of the important pillars of it will be economic recovery of the country, and this is not something Turkey alone can help or Syria alone can do it by its own. So the Arab states, particularly the Gulf states, do need to support to the regime in Syria. So we don't know at the moment whether they will be positioning themselves close to Turkey or to other actors. And that's going to be quite a determinant in determining the future of Syria. The fifth determinant is, as of now, Russia and Iran looks like they're not going to have a significant effect on the future of Syria. But looking at recent history, both the countries, particularly Russia since 1950s, has a close interest in Syria and also has been partners with Syria. So both countries are, in case they're able to solve the acute problems they're facing, may come together, and Russia particularly may start growing an interest in Syria again. But again, we don't know how their interests will be shaped, constructive in a manner to cooperate, open to cooperation with actors like Turkey, or a destructive one. We don't know that yet. This is going to be one of the important determinants. So this is all I wanted to say on the first part of my speech. These are the actors, in my opinion, who will be determinants in the future of Syria. And my second part, allow me to go into the Syrian policy of Turkey. What goals did we have? In my opinion, there are 4 goals. One of them is, first and foremost, Syria to be liberated. In March 2011, when the events broke out in Syria, Turkey's goal was Syria to be liberated and be governed as per the demands of the people. In my opinion, it's still the number 1. But as the Syrian war evolved, we saw that it started to stand as a security threat against Turkey. Very shortly it did, by the way, evolve into that. And therefore, since 2013-14, the primary priority for Turkey has been to eliminate the terror threat, which is originated from Syria and destinated towards Turkey. And ISIL also, back in the time, was one of those threats that was on our focus for elimination. Well, ISIL at the moment is a little bit less, let's say, strong or got weaker, but still a threat to Turkey compared. And on another note, PKK and YPG still stand to be major concerns. And also, the refugee crisis also became an issue. It's a problem, or let's say, this refugee issue has affected Turkey not only domestically, but it is in its international affairs as well, between EU and Turkey, from time to time positive, time to time negative. And some political parties even found this issue as a lucrative area for getting loans and votes. Well, I can tell you that they did not succeed, because I closely monitored the EU, and in all the European countries, the refugee propaganda is used for profit, and in those old major EU countries has given the chance for some parties to be the lead. For example, Italy was one example with Meloni. In Germany, we know which party is the lead, and their policies and politics is based on anti-refugee mobility. France as well. And UK, although after Brexit no longer part of the EU, and what is the traditional politics we have in the UK? It's the Conservatives and the Workers' Party. Now, in between the two, now as per the public polls, it is the party of Nigel Farage. So, which means that, by the way, they had given us symptoms of it in the parliament elections back in the time. So, means that in Turkey, or what I'm trying to say is that in Turkey, there have been also some opposition who wanted to use this as a material or resource for themselves, but the popular vote did not turn out to be supportive of that idea. So we continue looking at this whole issue as a part of also solving the refugee problem as well. But for us, the most important is the humane solutions. We should congratulate the president for his stance. Even freshly after the elections, he always supported and fought against anti-Syrian campaigns, and always stated that we will not refrain from our dedication and commitment to the protection of refugees and humanity-based policies. Now there is a new target and goal for Turkey as well. Yes, Syria gaining stability and becoming an economic partner. So jointly, two countries mutually supporting economic growth of each other. This is also one of the important goals of Turkey at the moment. I see that Murat Bey is looking directly into my eyes. Okay, I'll just be wrapping up. Let me also refer to the elephant we have in the room. By the way, I didn't take as much as Talha did, let's be honest. Give me some credit. Well, what are the risks also? I can count 5 risk elements. Some are current, some are historic. During Turkey's policies towards Syria, yes, we have faced challenges. For example, Turkey came directly in conflict at the front and the field with US, for example, on the north of to Syria, on the west of Euphrates. And also, we directly came across Russia. This is one of the greatest military forces of Turkey, the Idlib complex, if you may recall, and the lives we lost there. And if Turkey's policy was different, honestly, we would have faced even ever grower and bigger refugee problem. Iran, another important regional power. EU. Turkey had to also come across EU on the opposite sides. For example, during one of our operations, we can all remember how the relations between Turkey and Europe became very fragile during the peace spring. Well, I think Israel, the one that we are also coming across, and is one of the branches of Zionism, and the headquarters is centered in the US, and it's a large structure, networking, going deep into every corner and vein of the planet. Why? Because when you see how they are kind of show-offing their power and force during the times of Gaza, I was monitoring the German news, and the German politicians, while 400, 500 Gazans are losing their lives in the territory, are turning a blind eye and talking about Israel's rights to self-defense. For instance, that's one thing that I have seen. Also, for example, Zionism showing off its power, for example, in the US, the center, Netanyahu during the Congress in the UN, during the time of genocide, was able to go to stage, and his speech has been interrupted multiple times. These are all plays of power. So in terms of Syria's future, we all agree, from what I see, the greatest threat is Zionism. That's all I would like to say.
So we have around 15 minutes to receive questions, but in the think bags, there is a saying: shorter questions are more welcomed, we can say. So maybe a short introduction, and then we can hear your question. I will collect these questions, and then they will be answering. This is our interpreter speaking. Since the speaker is not using microphone, we are unable to provide an interpretation. So I had some observations and will publish a book regarding Syria. We all know that it is impossible for Syria to recover on its own. As a solution to that, maybe to have a more regional or global, if possible global, Syria's Friends platform. Can we think of such platform? It could coordinate the recovery process of Syria, and Turkey is active humanitarian means, but these efforts of Turkey within or without Syria sometimes can be perceived as a threat. Maybe we can have a more reasonable grant. And when I was there, Israel sent 700th bomb, but now there is a country that's been sending bombs, and can such message be given because the world is silent against these bombings so far. From Ankara Hacı Bayram Veli University, senior student. Iran right now is closing and focusing internally, but in Turkey and in Syria, the Alevi, Nusaybi, and Shia groups, they've been having a close cooperation to them. Do you have any forecasts regarding the future actions of Iran? Thank you, Professor Dr. Ali from Cha University. It was a very nice session, but I have a question. For Turkey to become a regional power, isn't that a development that might be disturbing for Arabic countries? And to break the power of Turkey, can't we have different initiatives? Don't we have to think of these dangers? Over the years, the Turkey has been increasing the influence, and again, the regional power is a lot more powerful right now. In the international policy, what kind of influences might be there can be thought, and can we arrange our strategy in accordance with that? I will have 3 more questions. Well, hello, thank you very much for this symposium. My name is Mehmet Uslu from the Foreign Policy Research and a writer. I would like to have one question. And there is a new government in Syria, and their comprehensive steps, including minorities to the assembly too, in Laskia, Tarsus, and in Syria, the minorities and their engagement to the National Assembly. What about the feedbacks from the field? I would like to learn about that. Thank you. Thank you very much for your speech. All of them were really nice. From Mimar Sinan Arts University, history student, senior student. My question is that we have a Syrian population where they were born and raised in Turkey. When they get back to Syria, what can be done to protect or preserve the audience there, because they can also increase the influence of Turkish and Turkish culture? I am a third-year student in Ege University. My question will be for Talha Bey. Sheybani. As a first threat in the Doha form, they call Israel as the biggest threat, and Netanyahu again is trying to create a barrier in the southern part of Syria. My question will be that between the Damascus and Tel Aviv, is there going to be a military tension, or is there going to be a Cold War with the inclusion of Turkey and Iran? There's a lady. Maybe we can have one more question. Hello, and thank you very much. My name is Emine Gözteprak from Iran Research Centers. My question will be for Talha Bey. Maybe the others can also answer. But it is really important to talk about the elephant in the room, but we always talked about the problem. What are the solutions of Turkey regarding this problem? I would like to ask a question regarding that. And one final question. Nemin Aslan Kömekçi from Bilkent University Political Sciences senior students. SDG integration process, and if there is any cloggings, when the military operation can be thought, what is the red dots? Thank you very much for all these questions. Right now there are at least 8 or 9 questions. I will give everyone 3 minutes. There are some direct questions to Talha, Helin, and Professor Kemal. You can try summarizing in 3 minutes. Well, the Iran policy was one of the questions. Structurally, Iran's policy is regarding their beliefs, and they have an understanding of policy over the sects. And it's been continuing. And after the 12 days war between Israel and Iran, it was the limit. After that, the grand strategy of Iran is mainly about, rather than the sects or ethnical groups, we don't know about that. If it continues the same, of course, their claim over these groups and context, organization, and these efforts might continue. We have seen that before in many different elements. We have seen that. And not to have it, a strong central structure is needed in Turkey. And an inclusive political system is needed. But as I said previously, especially for Iran and where it is going to take its place and how they're going to set their grand strategy is important. Talking about Israel, again, over these groups, they will continue to have this. And their basic objective and strategy in the region is that being not to have any powerful centralized country in the Middle East, like Iran, Iraq, if possible Turkey, with the ethnical and the sective groups will be separated, and there won't be any powerful actor. That's what they are trying to achieve. Egypt might seem rather stronger, but they also have their own limitations. So Israel won't give in this strategy. Can we settle on it? First, Israel is not only about Syria, but they are terrorizing all the region. They even bombed Qatar. They are bombing Iran, Syria, Lebanon, but one of the biggest alliances of America, Qatar, is bombed even by them. This shows that the real problem is that Israel has a problem with the world and region. Without solving that, it is impossible to provide a solution. And the only actor that can stop that is United States. And there is an Israel problem in the area right now. Israel will continue to do so over the Druze, Alevis, or the other sect groups, or they will even would like to have the SDG. So they won't give in. Maybe it might be solved, but Israel should be on a reasonable point to be able to provide a solution. And they should also provide a solution to the Palestine issue too. The areas where the Turkey and Israel has positive relations, where the peace processes were there. And if they can provide a peaceful solution to the Palestine issue, if they would have any understanding on it, right now we haven't seen anything regarding to that so far, but if they would have this approach, then there is a chance to be normalized. But without having that, there are limitations between Syria, between Israel and Turkey. And this competition can continue, of course, but when you look at the comments, for example, you can think as if Turkey and Israel will fight against each other. But they don't have to war. Sometimes there might be shoving of the military power, strategical power, but this can continue like this. Over the Greece or the Cyprus, for example, they were trying to create an alliance, and this competition will continue. But Israel's policy to not to have any powerful country in the region, again towards Turkey, they are also disturbed of Turkey's constructive efforts of Syria. They are also concerned. We can also clearly express this issue. And regarding the minorities, of course, in the region, since the Ottoman time, the region is built upon multicultural approach. In Damascus, Hatay, Antakya, these regional cities were built upon multicultural approach. This 50 years, in the last 50 years, is the exemptional situation. They've been trying to be separated. They're trying to become enemies to each other because of the colonialism. But again, for these countries, for the cities, cultures, essence, they have multicultural approach, and there are political methods to be able to do that too. That's why I think that the leaders should also have this understanding in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, or in the overall region. This inclusive multicultural structures should be integrated. Without that, we cannot have any stability. They are externalizing or marginalizing elements, extreme right elements, unfortunately, are one of the biggest barriers to provide solutions to those problems. The extreme right wing and the racist approach of Israel is the biggest problem. As long as they continue with that, it is difficult to have a stability around the region. Maybe the region should focus on their own historical codes. The mentality might be changed. Otherwise, all of these differences will be used as a vulnerability, and the external interventions will be done. The political actors who are responsible should play their roles in this regard too. Well, overall, based on the questions that I took note of, maybe I can start with this question. Whether there will be any reaction from the Arabic countries. This was one of the first questions. Turkey has a balanced policy in this regard. This is a joint success, is always emphasized. America and Trump is trying to break this game. Especially they present it as the success of Turkey. This is our opinion, but Turkey's discourse is more balanced. In cooperation, coordination with the Arabic countries, this is a process that was and can be achieved jointly. In this perspective, there may not be as much reaction as you think. And you also said that I have seen that in the field and I have seen some reactions, and I would like to hear about that more because we talked a lot of soft power recently, not with Kemal Hoca, but especially during the PhD thesis, we are always working with professors in our university, and there were a lot of questions, questionnaires, and the soft power is really important for Turkey. And what is the benchmark of soft power? How can you measure soft power, for example? You have to look at the policy outcome. This is what is said by Joseph Naidi, for example. If you can create the outcome that you have, then you have soft power. Even though it seems like we have the desired soft power so far. Next, we will be able to see that are we exaggerating that, or realistically what can be done. So I also would like to focus on these outcomes. Sometimes we exaggerate a lot. They love us. But sometimes there might be extra criticism. I think we're somewhere between. We should have a stance somewhere between. Of course, there might be criticism, and Syria is one of the central countries of the Arabic nationalism. And this, what is the other? The founding other is the Ottoman Empire. Again, because of their coming from Ottoman Empire, and their independence against that. This is the narrative they have. This is the understanding they have actually, and the others utilized that previously. But when you look at the updated, the recent relations between Turkey and Syria, especially in terms of the conscience or in terms of humanitarian aids, we hold the hand of Syrian people. And the negative aspects on the field belongs to Damascus. It is another reality, and there might be other realities in the field too, and I would like to hear more about them too. Another aspect is that the Jordan, Turkey, Israel, yes, there might be more tension, and there might be a vulnerable Cold War process. And there is an example that I shared with my students regarding the Turkey and Israel. It's not like, okay, I'm not playing anymore. Now, this is hurtful. This is hurting us. It is quite stressful because of the rightful reasons, but it is also very important in terms of the dynamics of the region. Egypt, Israel, for the other countries, this is a relation that should be continued. And the key part will be like that. If America can give up on Netanyahu, then yes, then the Zionism is another aspect. But if Netanyahu would leave, maybe diplomacy channels might be re-established. The big countries are more available for that, but maybe with the government change, there might be different warnings from US, and the process might change. It won't be an amazing relation, but along with that, both country knows that these relations should be ensured for the regional dynamics. Another example is NATO. The membership of NATO for Turkey is important guarantee to not to have any conflict, to not to have any direct conflict. The NATO membership is very important because Israel knows that Turkey is not Egypt, Qatar, or the others. And Israel is also like a de facto NATO member. That's why sometimes there are some comments. The NATO's success is measured by its member countries not to have any war between each other. So this is the biggest success. Actually, the members don't have the armed conflicts.
Therefore, I don't see it as a recent scenario. What could be the urgent red line? I hope that that wouldn't be the case, because it would be very, very severely, let's say, retaliated by Turkey. It would be an armed attack. And I don't think Israel has the courage to do that. Humanitarian dimension. If everything is in order and stability is built with a hope to have a welfare life, the Syrians who were in Turkey going back to Syria, and how can we turn it into output for Turkey? I don't want to, of course, make humans an instrument here, but soft power is exactly like this, how the diplomacy work among countries. Those people, when after they return to their countries, will still hold a value for Turkey, a very valuable one. For example, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Syria currently has completed education in Turkey, but that's the nature of, and we have so many foreign policy actor organizations, be it TICA or the UNICEF Institute, or be it the Presidency of Religious Affairs, so on and so forth. So those are already active in the newly established Syria, but it's not going to be only them. Other countries will also have those channels of soft power as well as actors of soft power. So we will still be in the arena with them, considering the Caucasus or the Balkans. I don't want to take also a lot of your time. The Arab states, will they feel uncomfortable for Turkey gaining power? That's a risk. That's a risk. It's a possibility. However, what I can say about this is this regional power competition, if the Middle Eastern states are able to manage it, they wouldn't feel that uncomfortable. What we know is that, yes, there are some ethnicity differences or religious sect and religious differences, as well as the regional power conflicts. When not managed, it leads to conflict. If it is well managed, there won't be a conflict. For example, there are two examples, the pre-1945 Europe and post-1945 Europe. The pre-1945 Europe is a great example for this differences and diversities, also further reinforced by regional power interests of particularly Germany, has turned into a conflict because it was poorly managed. And the Europeans, we saw it that they failed and they were constantly in conflict. But in the post 1945, I don't know, there's a critical milestone, and I also don't know if something happened similar in the Middle East. But in the post 1945, they have learned how to manage these differences. So it is no longer dragging them into a conflict. The religious differences are not pushing them and drawing them into conflict, but there is no, for example, regional superiority contest among them anymore. There might be, yes, still fearing if, for example, Germany got too strong, it may still become a threat, but that's not a reason solid enough for a conflict. So what are we going to do now? Are we going to do the pre-1945 or are we going to go for post-1945? Unfortunately, we seem to be following the trend as well, the pre-trend. So, and the differences are constantly drawing us into conflict, but there is a way, at least proven and theoretically, and also implemented also practically, so which means that those differences should not be pulling us towards conflict. If Arabs consider it the way I just explained, if they look for compromises with Turkey and other countries, just like Germany, Italy, and France are doing on a daily basis, then they will not be discomfortable with Turkey gaining power, but they will see it as an opportunity to benefit from it. But yes, with the old style approach, Turkey becoming stronger could probably, yes, make the Arab society uncomfortable, and they may take some measures which might also be uncomfortable for Turkey, which will trigger another wave of conflict. So, what changed that perspective in Europe is the mass destruction of the Second World War. 80 million lives lost in vain, a great crash. And after seeing that deep bottom, they learned that it's a necessity to manage those differences. Did we see and face that deep bottom? This genocide in Gaza and Israel being aggressive and attacking Qatar, Yemen, Lebanon, Gaza, West Bank all together at once, and even getting so arrogant to bomb Qatar, which is the US base in the Gulf. It's showing us that we might be getting and heading towards that deep bottom. Maybe it's still even too early, that we need to see fairly the bottom before we can adopt the same mentality the Europe did. Well, thank you very much to all our participants for your questions, and thank you our panelists. Our next panel is going to start in 10 to 15 minutes, and it is going to be about how domestically Syria can transform. Looking forward to meet you at the second session.